2023 is officially behind us, and we saw a lot of great stories come through our newsroom. Today, I'm asking writers, editors, and columnists what potential stories they think will define the coming year. I'm Cody Long, video journalist, and this is a look ahead at 2024. In 2023, we saw great reporting on a wide range of local and California topics, from our coverage of the mass shooting in January in the San Gabriel Valley to tracking Tropical Storm Hilary, to a look at the dangerous respiratory diseases that California workers cutting countertops have been contracting. Deputy Managing Editor for News, Shelby Crad, joins us today. Shelby, thank you for taking the call.
It's great to be here.
What do you see on the horizon for LA and California in a broader sense for 2024?
Well, first of all, it's an election year, and that's going to be a really big one here in California and across the country. Yeah, California is a predominantly Democratic state, but there are a lot of swing districts, especially congressional ones, that could end up determining who controls Congress. For the last few years, there have been a bunch of districts in the Central Valley and Orange County and Inland Empire that have been swinging more toward Democrats than the last election. They swung a little bit back toward Republicans. And this really could determine who represents Congress and also what control Congress has. And frankly, I think that a lot of Democrats are concerned, if Biden's number is going to be low, that this could be a big boon for Republicans in these swing districts that could have an impact on the election. And of course, a Republican administration is going to always be different for California than a Democratic one. So we'll see how that goes. And there'll be a lot of local elections too, in which, a lot of the issues that we've been dealing with the last time will still be around too. So I think first and foremost, we're looking at the politics and frankly, looking at some of the trends we've seen in the last few elections. Do we see how does the Democratic coalition continue to be how it was in 2020? The Democratic blue wave, do we see more defections among Latinos, which has been something that we have seen in the last few elections, less in California than elsewhere? So those are all the things that we'll be looking at.
Wow. Is there anything outside of politics locally that is kind of on your radar?
Well, I think that the other big one, obviously, is, the environment and climate. That is something that is a huge fact of life in California. In the last few years, we've seen the extremes. 2021 was an extreme drought year. 2022 was an extreme drought year. Then, of course, 2023, we had record rains, and that is all what extreme climate is all about. We'll see what happens this year. It's possible that we'll have more rains. That was a El Nino forecast, but there's growing concern that maybe that won't come and will pretty quickly sort of whipsaw back to drought. One thing I think is also notable about 2023, it was one of the least damaging and dangerous fire years we've had in quite a few years. That's largely in part to the combination of very wet conditions that went well into the summer months, as well as, frankly, a lack of really severe winds. But winds are the number one determining factor of fires. And so a more extreme wind year could very easily cause a lot more destruction with fires. And we'll be seeing how that plays out because the temperatures are continuing to increase. And it's really that temperatures drying out the brush really kind of causing these fires to get bigger. So that'll be one thing we'll definitely be looking at as well.
In 2023, the Los Angeles Times debuted Deos, a section by Latinos telling stories about Latino culture and identity. We've seen Deos report on everything from shifting demographics in Hispanic communities in the state, how some in the Latino community have been a voice for Palestine, and how that voice has caused ripples in Hollywood. We've also seen a strong presence on Deos' social media accounts, covering the many community events that show the full spectrum of LA's Latino culture. Angel, Martina, Fidel, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Fidel, I want to start with you. Is there what are you anticipating for the section in kind of a broad sense for 2024?
I think something that is really on top of mind for us is how do we build on the work that we've already done. And really, for me, there's a lot of different big events coming up in 2024. One of the most obvious one is the presidential election. I think every election cycle you hear about the Latino vote, the so-called Latino vote. And one of the areas that we look to take ownership of is providing as in-depth a coverage on this electorate which is not homogenous, which really can vary from geography to, how many generations deep in they are. And so that to me is going to be a big um, source of stories for us, just because it's a presidential election. Obviously, the stakes are very high, and so I have no doubt that the Latino electorate is going to play a major role in that.
Thank you, Martina. I've been loving seeing everything on Deos's social media accounts, all kinds of like community events. Is there anything for 2024 that you're excited to explore for the community and how it can kind of manifest on social media?
Yeah, thank you. We've had a lot of fun this year exploring different ways of storytelling on our social platforms. And we've really built out this community of social creators that are from the community and really know their community really well and have been able to find these stories that I don't think anyone on our team would have thought of covering. So we're really excited to continue exploring that in 2024. I think as Fidel mentioned, the election is going to be a really big topic that is going to sort of steep into all of these different aspects. Palestine again has also been like very top of mind for a lot of these Latino communities in LA. I'm sure that's going to have an effect on everything that is happening in our community. And then the other thing is, I think continuing to highlight community voices and community leaders. We've noticed that whenever we do post like a profile of someone in these communities, those gain a lot of attention, a lot of comments, a lot of engagement. So I think we're gonna continue to explore profiling and highlighting community voices.
Fidel kind of talked about presidential election in 2024. I'm curious if there's anything else that you're excited for that's coming down the pike in 2024.
Well, I think for us, uh, we have a lot of things that we're planning on doing to grow and expand our project. If 2024 was or 2023 was the year that Deos was born, 2024 is the year it really hopefully takes off. And so I think we have a lot of things that we're hoping to do and bring in more and distinct voices in the Latino community. One of the advantages I think that we've had since launch is people now, other Latino creatives are seeing, and Martina touched on it a little bit on the social platforms, but it's also the same for us on the sort of the more traditional text side, is that we're getting a lot more Latino creatives willing to work with us, and not just writers, but also videographers and illustrators and people that are thinking differently outside of just what the standard, what we consider newspaper journalism to be. So that is what excites me, is the opportunity to grow and to expand and to see where this goes. In terms of topics, not to say that I'm excited, because it's not an exciting topic in the sense of what's happening in states around immigration. I think it dovetails a little bit with what Fidel was talking about the election. I mean, I think those of us that have been around the block with this for a while know that immigration seems to always pop up and become this huge issue when it's an election year. And so it's no coincidence that, you're starting to see legislation in states like Texas and other states around immigration that really, I think, is going to highlight a lot of the stark differences in this country around the acceptance of newcomers that are coming in. And so, again, not to say that I'm particularly excited about that topic, because a lot of time it becomes like a demagogued in a lot of ways, and there's no real solutions. It's just really just used to beat people over the head one way or the other with it. So, but I do think that that's going to be something that's going to be top of mind going forward. I mean, I don't think we can ignore it as it affects our community, and obviously the election. And depending on, it doesn't really matter which side of the political aisle you're on. I know that, Latinos are probably going to take center stage when you start talking about kind of the newer swing states like Nevada and Arizona, where the Latino vote is really going to be critical. So.
It's certainly not a monolith. You guys have a huge task, and it's really exciting to see how that manifests in its different ways. I'm really excited to see what comes out of the section in the coming year. Thank you guys for coming in and being a part of this. In music in 2023, Beyonce went on her Renaissance tour, bringing in over $500 million, and Taylor Swift's Eras tour grossed over $1 billion. Meanwhile, in Hollywood, we saw both the Writers Guild of America and SAG-AFTRA go on strike. The WGA strike was the second longest in the union's history at 148 days. I'm joined by Deputy Editor of Calendar, Nate Jackson. Let's start with Hollywood. Are the effects of last year's strikes going to dominate our coverage this year, or is there something else in Hollywood that you think we should be expecting instead?
Well, definitely, we will be talking a lot this year about the ramifications of last year's historic strike with the actors and writers guilds, and sort of how the path forward based on the deal that they've reached with their unions will affect not only employment, but also, like, the working conditions of people in Hollywood, from all different areas, from cast to crew to creative directors, all the rest. And so, there's always going to be ways for us to kind of like take different slices into the Hollywood economy when it relates to how we create new paths that will be more equitable to everybody, and also at the same time giving us new great stuff to watch, because we've done with what we've done the best we could with what we had, in terms of, like, streaming and watching stuff. So we can all kind of feel the effects. So we're looking to hopefully be highlighting great new projects, things that will be coming out in 2024 that were able to be scraped together, towards the end of the previous year.
Is there anything in the music industry that you think is going to stand out this year?
Well, I mean, definitely in terms of like streaming as well, we've talked about like Spotify and all of the different issues with, artist compensation and the solvency of the company in general, it being such a massive part of the music ecosystem. But people are definitely questioning whether or not it will be able to withstand sort of, just the different market factors that have gone along with different labels and artists asking about, again, fair compensation. We're coming up on Grammy season, so I think the talk will always kind of center around like, hey, look at these artists that have done so well for themselves, but like, what are, the rest of the field and people that maybe don't have, the Taylor Swift numbers. There's very few, there's none really other than her. So it's like how are people making a living in this business through music, whether you're again in production, an artist, or a label, trying to suss all that out. So I think, music's the streaming space will definitely be an area that we follow as terms like the sort of the evolution or the de-evolution, as it were, of how everything goes from a market standpoint with music.
LA isn't, I don't think, generally known as as much as maybe New York or something, for as being a comedy town, or maybe even Chicago. But is there anything in comedy in LA that's piquing your interest for 2024?
I mean, definitely you can't talk about comedy in 2024 without mentioning Netflix's The Joke, which is coming back after taking a year off. That's a huge festival that involves like literally the biggest names in the world in terms of comedy, and it's right here in our backyard, and it's been a huge flagship event that again begs the question of like how a streamer like Netflix has invested so much now into live events and focusing their attention on capturing that comedy fan where they're at. And that's a lot what we're trying to do too with our own coverage with LA Times and comedy. We recently launched like a comedy show of our own we did just last weekend at the Ace Hotel, and it was really well received. And it was just one of those things where I think all different types of media are looking at how they can sort of appeal to fans of stand-up, because it's hotter than it's ever been. And I think this is another year where you're going to see a lot more activity around different streamers getting in the game with stand-up specials, seeing what Netflix is going to do to try to pivot, to try to like help innovate and change the game, because they're kind of like been the leaders, the top dog in that space for the last 10 years. And then, seeing what new comics and new types of comedy sort of emerge out of, not only just stand-up comedy, but like when you're talking about sketch and also influencers who do skits. I mean, TikTok, all the rest. It's just it's a part of our daily consumption and entertainment, and it's going to stay that way, I think, for a long time. So we're just looking forward to covering that.
In 2023, Southern California was hit by Hurricane Hilary, a tropical storm bringing record-breaking rainfall to the area. However, it didn't stop large wildfires burning hundreds of thousands of acres in the rest of the state. And most recently, two of LA's largest landfills have been battling chemical reactions deep underground, polluting the air in the surrounding neighborhood. Climate columnist Sammy Roth is with us to talk about what to expect in California's environment in 2024. Sammy, thanks for being here.
Hey, Cody, happy to.
What do we have on the horizon for climate and environment in 2024?
Well, I think that 2024 is really going to be a year when we start to see whether California and the United States as a whole are really going to do what it takes to move fast enough, to stop just talking about addressing climate change and start actually moving fast enough to really avoid some of the worst impact. I mean, we've been seeing those impacts in California. We've seen the last few years just how devastating wildfires are getting, how much hotter and deadlier heat waves are getting, storms and mud flows getting worse. We've been seeing, sort of whiplash between drought and epic storms. That whiplash getting stronger and stronger. We're seeing this play out on the ground here. So the question is now, are we really going to do what it takes fast enough to deal with this? Scientists just very recently reached the conclusion globally that we need to cut carbon dioxide pollution 43% by 2030 in order to have any chance of keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the goal that scientists have agreed upon, that the nations of the world have agreed upon that we need to meet. I mean, 43% by 2030, that's nearly in half, and that is 7 and just about 6 years from now, if we're talking 2024. That is not a lot of time. California has this target on the books of 100% clean energy by 2045. President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, this big climate law, last year in 2022, which includes a lot of money for clean energy. But what really needs to happen now is we really need to start building stuff a lot faster to replace fossil fuels. California has built a bunch of solar farms in the desert and wind turbines out in the windy places. We need to start building that probably at a pace 2 or 3 or 4 times faster than we have been in the past. And frankly, that's getting harder and harder. And I've spent a lot of time covering this. The more of these big renewable energy projects get proposed and get built, the more opposition there is, the more you see people who live in rural communities saying, hey, we don't want this stuff in our backyard. The more you're seeing environmentalists even who have traditionally defended the ecology of the desert and migratory bird species who might be impacted by wind farms. You see those groups standing up and saying, hey, don't put this here, put this somewhere else. The only problem is no matter where else you try to put it, somebody is there trying to block it. Rooftop solar has become really controversial in California. Surprisingly, you had the appointees of Governor Gavin Newsom, who despite being a real big proponent of climate policy and of solving climate change, his appointees voted about a year ago to dramatically reduce incentives for rooftop solar power, basically arguing that they were an unfair subsidy for the wealthy. So you see the rooftop solar market starting to crash in California right now. You see all of these areas where California really needs to be leading the rest of the nation and moving a lot faster to reduce emissions, where it's now actually getting harder, where it's just harder to build the big infrastructure we need, harder to incentivize the small scale clean energy that would also be helpful. I think 2024 is really going to be a year where we start to see, are we going to build this stuff at the pace that we need to build it, or are we going to keep, sort of scooting along too slowly to tackle the magnitude of the problem? Similar issues going on in our own homes. A big source of pollution contributing to climate change are gas appliances, our gas heaters, our gas stoves, gas clothes dryers. increasingly, you've got cities in California and all over the nation, but mostly in California, trying to require new homes to be electric, to get people to switch to electric heating, electric cooking. That's going to be a big issue in 2024 because you had a court ruling just a couple of months ago saying, no, you're not allowed to do that anymore. Berkeley was the first city in the nation to require new homes to be electric. That got thrown out by an appeals court. So that battle is continuing to play out. You've got other cities trying to figure out other strategies for how to get get around that court ruling. It's I think really going to be a year where you start to see, are we going to find ways to convince people that this is something we need to be doing in our homes? Are we going to find ways to get the costs down and actually make it affordable for folks for whom electric appliances might be too expensive? And I would say last but not least on the transportation front as well, the biggest source of climate pollution in the United States are our cars and trucks. Electric vehicle sales are making up an increasing share of car sales in California. Something like a quarter of all new cars sold in California recently have been electric. Is that going to continue, or is that going to start to stopper? We need that growth to really continue. California has a goal right now of no new gasoline car sales after 2035. 2035 might seem like a long way off, but at the scale that big industries like the automobile industry move, that's not too long in the future. So those are the things I'm watching, looking at 2024. Are we going to start moving a lot faster, or are things going to keep moving along too slowly to really get at the magnitude of the climate crisis?
Thanks for being here, Sammy. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
There's always new food trends popping up in Los Angeles. In 2023, our reporters wrote about these trends in the form of bagels, cookies, and pizza. The Michelin Guide gave 7 new restaurants in the state the distinction of a star, including Heritage in Long Beach. 2023 also said goodbye to more than a few fan favorite restaurants in LA, including West Avila's Angry Egret Diner, Silver Lake Cantonese restaurant Needle, Orange County's Taco Maria, Grand Central Market's Filipino Sari Sari store, and Korean tasting menu restaurant Kin, just to name a few. Columnist Jen Harris joins us. Jen, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What are you expecting for food in LA and beyond in 2024?
Well, unfortunately, I think we're going to continue to see closures because it's becoming more and more difficult for restaurants to operate in Los Angeles and around the country as the price of ingredients goes up, the price of labor. It's just more expensive to run a restaurant, and it's more expensive for people to eat out, and a lot of people can't afford it right now. So I do think that we're going to see more closures, but at the same time, what's able to kind of push through and be successful and stay open, those places are getting more accolades, whether they're locally or nationally or even internationally, as people continue to see LA as the wonderful dining destination that it is. So more closures, but I think also more recognition of how special Los Angeles is as a city in general, and as, of course, a place to eat.
Is there anything that that the state or maybe even locally with the city, is there anything that that governments can do to help assist restaurants, or is there anything that is like especially kind of making things difficult that could be relieved in that kind of realm?
Yeah, I think that the city, especially earlier this year, there were some issues with obstacles to maintaining your patio dining. So whatever you would set up during COVID, being able to keep that how it is. So I think as long as the city recognizes that that was really a way for these places to survive, is to keep whatever patios they have open for the additional seating or whatever it provided for the restaurant, I think that would be super helpful. But I also think a lot of the responsibility falls on diners as well, to be understanding when prices do go up, because I think these restaurants are really just scraping by, and they're doing it so that they can just stay open. So I think if we look at eating out as a luxury, as a luxury that it is, and are more willing to pay for the food that we eat, that could also really help as well.
Dining out in the cities, in this city is always a kind of a special occasion, I think, for me whenever I go out. Jen, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Guides are a mainstay at the Times, giving readers a glimpse at the best of what LA has to offer. In 2023, we introduced a series of neighborhood guides called This Must Be the Place, where locals and travelers alike can experience every pocket and neighborhood throughout the area to its fullest. Assistant editor and writer Danielle Dorsey is here with us today. Thank you, Danielle, for joining.
Thank you for having me.
What kinds of trends do you think are coming in 2024 that guides will be best suited for?
Yeah, I think this year we are going to continue to see people interested in exploring the cities kind of right outside of Los Angeles. So I think guides that cater to road trips and where to eat on those kind of like weekend trips and day trips are really going to be popular. And I think we continue to see interest in just all of the different cuisines that are at our fingertips in Los Angeles and the greater Southern California region. And so I think guides that really zero in on, where to find the best hot pot or where to find the best boat noodle soup, that really just kind of dive into specific cuisines and dishes are going to continue to be popular as well.
Excellent. Is there anything, are there any aspects that our guides haven't touched yet that seem kind of like an exciting kind of frontier for 2024?
I wouldn't say that we haven't touched it, but some things that we definitely want to do more of is we want to do more drink coverage. There's so much to cover in the world of what we drink, whether it's alcoholic or non-alcoholic. And so we will definitely be leaning into that. And then I think the other thing that we want to do more of is kind of experience first guides. So instead of just telling you where to eat, we might guide you towards restaurants that are perfect for a specific occasion.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Danielle. I really appreciate you jumping in.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
2024 is an election year, not only nationally for the president, but in California for senators, representatives, and more down the ballot. From Washington, we have DC Deputy Bureau Chief Nick Bauman with us. Nick, thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
What do you see coming down the pike for us in 2024?
Look, obviously the biggest story of the year is the presidential election. Right now, former President Trump has a pretty significant lead over his Republican rivals in the primary field. It would be pretty remarkable for one of them to catch him, although that's still possible. But the most likely outcome here is that we'll be headed into November with a rematch of the 2020 election. The difference being, there are a couple really important differences here. One is that voters will have had a chance to experience 4 years of each candidate as president, which is something that hasn't happened in a long time, race between two presidents. And the other thing is that it's very unusual, I would say, pretty much unprecedented, for someone like Trump, who's under multiple federal, criminal, and civil indictments, and who denies the results of the 2020 election and attempted to stay in power, to be a possible president again. And if the election were held today, it's quite possible that he would win it. So the American people really have a lot of information about the two candidates and a big choice to make going into this election year.
And then what about Congress? What's going on with Congress for California?
So in California, the most important congressional race is the Senate race. California has, as many of our viewers know, top two primaries. Those will be in early March. People will get their ballots in the mail starting in February. And in the Senate race, you have three House Democrats, Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, and Barbara Lee, running for the seat that was held by the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. The leading Republican candidate is probably former Major League Baseball player Steve Garvey. And the question really is, who's going to come out of that top two primary? In California, unlike in many other states, you can end up with a general election race in November where you have two Democrats, you have two Republicans, you have a Republican and Democrat. There are a lot of potential options, um, and that's really what we're looking at headed into March. The three Democrats are different in style and different levels of experience, but obviously more similar to each other than they are to any of the Republican candidates in the field. So that's the big race on statewide.
Okay, excellent. Anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, the policy stakes of the election are pretty significant. Usually, although not always, usually the party that wins the White House, or often the party that wins the White House, can also win control of Congress in a presidential year. And if you win control of Congress, then you have a chance to enact your agenda. And there are all sorts of differences between the parties on issues like the war in Ukraine, taxation, healthcare. Trump has said he wants to try again to repeal Obamacare, which, as California is by far the biggest beneficiary of Obamacare funding. So they're really high stakes here, and voters will have a choice to make.
Excellent. Thank you so much for jumping in on this.
All right, thank you.
One of the biggest sports stories of the year has only just happened with the record-breaking $700 million signing of Shohei Ohtani with the Dodgers. We have Deputy Sports Editor Ed Guzman and columnist Bill Plaschke here with us today. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
What are you guys expecting for 2024 in the world of sports, not only with the Dodgers, but with all of our franchises?
Well, the Dodgers is the main thing. I mean, they're the number one team in town. They just spent over $1 billion, B as in billion, to acquire free agents Ohtani and Yamamoto, the right-handed pitcher. They got to win a championship. I mean, that's the bottom line. They have to win their first non-COVID championship since 1988, which is, 35 years or 36 years. They have to win. This places the onus on them. They will win a championship this year, or it'll be a complete failure. So the Dodgers is the main. That's got to happen. That's whether it's going to happen or not, I don't know. But that's the biggest story. That's the story everybody's going to be following all summer long. Ohtani, the greatest player in baseball history, with the most legendary franchise in baseball history, with the most money in baseball history. They got to win.
Thank you. Ed, do you have anything to add to that? Or?
I was going to say, and I would say to add to that, I mean, to Bill's point, part of the reason, too, that it'll be the story all year long is that it's now also an opportunity to see what else they build around these two guys, with Ohtani making such a historic effort to defer so much money. It's like, all right, the Dodgers have room to keep adding, keep building. So it's like, what kind of team is going to show up at spring training here in a couple months? And then what kind of team are they going to have throughout the season? And they are under the gun, and no one more than perhaps Dave Roberts, I would think, because as Bill astutely noted, in the wake of the intro presser, I mean, this was a big celebration, but it was no party for Dave Roberts.
There's going to be hundreds of media at every Dodger game. Every game's going to be like a playoff game, because the Japanese media is going to be everywhere. They follow their players' every move. It's going to be a complete distracted nightmare over at Dodger Stadium. So we'll see how they handle it. It's a whole new world for the Dodgers. The Dodgers are always intensely scrutinized and intensely covered. It'll be more intense than ever. It's going to be nuts. They may have to build a new press box just for the media. I mean, it's so crazy.
Wow. Is anything else going to be able to slip through the Ohtani cracks, or is this all we're going to be seeing all year?
No, I think also slipping through is if the Lakers don't finish well, this could be LeBron James last year. LeBron James could retire. He's going to be 40. He's been hurt a lot. He's playing at an exceptional level. He's playing at MVP level. He hasn't slowed down a bit. But at some point, Father Time is undefeated. And you wonder at what point does he quit? And this could be the year. He almost retired last year. He talked about it. So if the Lakers don't win a championship, I can see, there's a chance LeBron retires. So that would be monumental. He's the greatest player in basketball history. to retire next summer. So that's on the landscape for the Lakers. And then for the Clippers, they could win a championship. This is the first year Kawhi Leonard and Paul George have been healthy. They're as talented and deep as any team in the league. While the Lakers could have LeBron retiring, the Clippers could step up and win a championship. And they will move in. They will also, in the fall, they will move into their new arena in Inglewood, the Intuit Dome. So that's going to be big too for the Clippers. So the Clippers will be big news as well as the Lakers.
Yeah, I would also mention it's more of a quirk than perhaps interesting just because of the potential for the season. But I would say USC and UCLA moving into the Big Ten as we head into college football in the fall. That'll be interesting to kind of see how that all shakes out. I mean, Bill has hammered both USC and UCLA for disappointing seasons this past season. And they're certainly not great expectations, but it'll still be interesting to see where they'll measure up as we currently record this. You see Michigan, powerful Michigan, in the national championship game. And are they even remotely in that zip code? Probably not. But again, just kind of an interesting quirk. It's also an Olympic year. So, I mean, I think, we'll always have local ties. It's the last Summer Olympics before the ones in LA in 2028. So again, there'll be all kinds of storylines coming out of that. But as we've been sort of hitting at all along here, I think a lot of that will get dwarfed by Ohtani and the Dodgers.
And don't sleep on UCLA women's basketball. They haven't won a championship since 1974, but they have what I think is the best team in the country. They're unbeaten as of this recording, and they're fun to watch. Women's basketball has never been really big in this town, but I think women's college basketball is big in March Madness, and they're going to be really good. And they're going to go to the Final Four. So UCLA women's basketball team, watch for them.
Excellent. Exciting stuff, guys. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Ed, for joining today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.